I was rewatching Akira again today for the umpteenth time and realized, oh my god, it's 2019, we have to do an Akira video to celebrate. The story of Akira, of course, takes place in the year 2019, and man, after all these years, I still don't have my own bike. I have to see if Honda will send me one of those NM4s. It's pretty sweet, but doubtful. Anyways, I want to thank you for pressing play. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. I upload comic book and superhero content weekly. Alright, with that out of the way, let's jump right into our story. In 1988, the world was treated to something truly special. Katsuhiro Otomo's post-apocalyptic dystopian cyberpunk film, the beloved masterpiece Akira, changed the landscape of not only anime but cinema as a whole. It opened the eyes of the American audience to a beautiful medium full of captivating art and deep philosophical stories. In the 1980s, in an era before iPhones and Alexa and Crunchyroll, the United States was largely unfamiliar with Japanese culture. There's a myth that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg declined the opportunity to bring Akira to America, saying it wouldn't be accepted by audiences, but boy were they wrong. Akira was so successful that it paved the way for things like Miyazaki's Studio Ghibli, or the countless properties that came out of Toei Animation like Digimon and One Piece and Yu-Gi-Oh! Or most recently there was a movie that came out, Dragon Ball Super Broly. If you're in the USA and fan of any of these, you owe it to Akira for proving just how viable this all was in the US market. Without this film, we might not have Alita or Ghost in the Shell or Cowboy Bebop or Evangelion here in America. So in the mid-20th century landscape dominated by children's fare from Disney and Warner Brothers and Hanna-Barbera, now there came an animated genre that was entirely adult and completely legitimized. Before the slickness of CG-heavy anime, Akira still proved to be something immediately special. In fact, Akira used more than double the amount of pictures that animated films of the time used for each frame, providing the film with a clean, smooth graphic unheard of at the time, that were coupled with an intricate and breathtaking attention to detail. I love the scenes, for example, where the bikers are racing away and there's like a neon light trail left in their wake. Blows me away every time, and they're all throughout the film. 160,000 single pictures and over 2,200 shots made up this film. The frames per second were much higher than its counterparts. So groundbreaking it was that 50 new colors were created for the movie, and all of this ballooned the budget to nearly $10 million. Again, unheard of in the late 1980s, and more specifically in $88, it was 1.1 billion yen, which is about 8.5 million US. And it did gross just shy of 50 million. As a quick aside, I do mention specifically the US instead of the Western market on purpose. Europe, particularly Spain, Italy, and Germany, enjoyed anime as far back as the 70s with things like Mazinger, Speed Racer, Captain Future, but that's for another video. I just wanted to briefly clarify that, so let's get back to the story. A nuclear blast is the explosive beginning of the Akira saga. The story jumps ahead 30 years to 2019, where we met Tetsuo and Kaneda, both of whom are part of the same biker gang. The streets are ruled by these warring biker gangs that wielding lead pipes and bad attitudes. During a ride in Old Tokyo, Tetsuo encounters the psychic Takashi, who awakens Tetsuo's own psychic abilities. The JSDF are suddenly interested in Tetsuo, and they quickly capture all three of them, Tetsuo, Takashi, Kaneda. In custody, Kaneda, who's the biker gang leader by the way, meets an alluring terrorist named Kai. The JSDF quickly realize that Tetsuo's powers rival that of Akira, the powered child that destroyed Tokyo 30 years ago. Fearing the destruction of Neo Tokyo, Tetsuo quickly becomes a target. The JSDF and their colonel stage a coup d'etat against the corrupt government and bring all their forces to bear on Tetsuo. I won't tell you exactly what happens next, but it's absolutely a must-see. What happens to Tetsuo is both horrifying and spectacular. You have to see it for yourself to appreciate it. I suppose now is a good time as any to tell you that the name Akira literally means bright or wisdom or light from the sun. Something that you'd expect, from a nuclear blast, I suppose. But the power of Akira out of Tetsuo are an innate power residing in all living beings called ki or chi. It can be awakened artificially via science, as was the case with the children in the movie, or by natural evolution. Ra is an ancient Egyptian god, the god of the sun, king of the gods, and creator of the world. So Akira literally is the awakening of that godly spiritual energy within himself, and he becomes this pure energy, a singularity. And the power of the gods, as well as some of the plot of the movie, reside in his name itself. Once that's awakened though, free will kicks in, and it's up to the holder of that power to choose to use it how they want. The anime released in 1988, and it's also the year that a Marvel imprint called Epic Comics began a 38-issue run of comic books for the US. They've since been collected in 6 trade paperback volumes. It was perfect. It's bloody hard look at life after the blast hit comic book stores alongside things like The Killing Joke and The Watchmen. It was a time of darker themes and heavier stories, so it really was primed for success among readers. Not only is it one of the first manga to be translated in its entirety to English, Akira is also the first ever digitally covered comic book. Otomo himself reached out to Steve Olaf for the color separation project. So rewind 6 years from 88 to 1982 when Young Magazine, a Japanese shonen magazine, not to be confused with Shonen Jump, was the first outlet to publish the manga. Kodansha then collected them all into the 6 volumes, and this is what Epic colorized and translated for their issues. Otomo has said he had drawn from the realism and detail of Miyazaki and Mobius and the world of Lucas's Star Wars and that dystopian cyberpunkiness of Bubblegum Crisis that had just come out like a year or two before this. And also, Yokoyama's Tetsujin was all of his inspiration when creating this manga. Funny enough, Star Wars itself was influenced by a different Akira Kurosawa and his samurai films. An Akira live-action movie in varying forms has been in development for nearly 20 years, the same amount of time Cameron and Rodriguez dedicated to their Alita project. This had gone through nearly a dozen writers, numerous directors like David Sandberg and Jordan Peele of Get Out fame. It wasn't until 2001 that Akira finally got an official DVD release. From its release to this time, you can only find it on VHS or even Laserdisc. When Pioneer bought the rights for like $1 million, it was remastered and redubbed for the DVD release. But then the original dub wasn't available until 2013 when Funimation reinstated it with their Blu-ray DVD combo pack release. In 2002, a year after that remastered DVD version hit Blockbuster shelves, Warner acquired the rights to an Akira film. Stephen Norrington, director of 1998's Blade, was going to bring a westernized version to the screen. But a few years later, Warner let their rights expire and they went to Kodansha. The guy that brought Batman Begins to Warner, a guy named Greg Silverman, convinced them to reacquire the rights. In 2008, Warner, along with Legendary, approached Kodansha, a manga publisher who held the rights, and gave them 7 figures for the film rights. The new movie would be a live-action film with DiCaprio and Otomo to produce. In fact, it was to be a pair of movies based on the 6 volumes of the 1982 story material instead of the anime. The anime film takes the first part and the last part of all of the manga stories and combines them with something in the middle, but they wanted to use the manga instead. Much like Death Note was brought to Seattle for the setting, this version was to bring the story from Neo-Tokyo to Manhattan. The studio thought that in a post-apocalyptic world, the old rules and places would no longer be relevant. Neo-Tokyo could just as easily be Manhattan as it could be Toronto or London or Sydney. It was reasoned, explain some of the inevitable whitewashing concerns that fans would have. In fact, McKenna's short list included Michael Fassbender, Brad Pitt, Reeves, Evans, Pine, James Franco, Zac Efron, the list goes on. People like Mila Kunis and Keira Knightley were approached for the role of Kai, and Tetsuo might have been Ezra Miller or James McAvoy. You see, whitewashing would have been the most prominent narrative. So the argument here purports, of course, that the Akira story can be of any major city. That's not explicitly a Japanese tale, that a post-apocalyptic megacity can be anywhere in the globe, as we were just saying. But this argument also forgets the deeper meaning of the story, of the connections to destruction. But this argument also forgets the deeper meanings of the story, of the connections to destruction that Japanese culture has had since Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and even before that for centuries, as the culture has had to time and again join hands and brace themselves against the impact of tsunamis. Japan sits atop an area where tectonic plates smash together over 1,000 times a year, producing earthquakes each time of varying magnitudes. Japan has long turned to allegory and metaphor to express this, probably most famously with Godzilla. The body horror on screen towards the end of the film are reminiscent of the effects of radiation poisoning, for example. Japan and Japanese culture are uniquely familiar with these phenomenon, and so when Akira opens up with a ground-burst nuclear explosion, it has much more impact and meaning than merely the blast itself, and that would be lost if it were anywhere else. After the first director left, the Hughesai, let's just go with Alan and Albert, came in as directors and told the world Akira would be PG-13. Now, if you've seen the amount of blood and brutality in the 1988 anime, you'll agree that a PG-13 rating would hold this back from being as impactful as Otomo's project was. Hughes left in 2011, and the writer of 2008's Iron Man movie, Mark Fergus, then came in to rework the script, and this all fell through. Warner went after Chris Nolan of Dark Knight fame and Michael Green, who worked with James Mangold to write Logan. Hopefully bring that around. Went into pre-production, but it ultimately all was shut down. Even the studio that they had in Vancouver set up for it. After a series of faltering attempts like Netflix's Death Note and Ghost in the Shell, we had Bleach and Alita Battle Angel. Now in 2019, the year of the Akira story, it's time for this to finally happen. Anime live-action adaptation genre seems it might have finally course-corrected. And the technology is also caught up to the vision. After seeing his beautiful rendition of Rick Deckard's Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049, I'd really like to see Denis Villeneuve bring Akira to life. After the shutdown in Vancouver, though, we learned in the past couple years that Warner Brothers is back at the proverbial Akira table again. Thor Ragnarok's Taika Waititi has been tapped to direct the film, and if he falls through, someone please call Villeneuve. Something Taika says he will pull from the manga, which is of course a much bigger, richer world than the anime. Avengers Infinity War's production designer David Scott is also on board this latest attempt. It's been tough though. Story, casting, budgeting have plagued this the entire time. I mean, let's face it, to do it justice, you need a good $250 million for the production alone, so it should be rated R, not PG-13. Set in Neo Tokyo, not Manhattan, and have a huge budget, more than what they were targeting as a $90 million production budget. Way more than that, at least double. Despite the anime coming out 30 years ago, it remains as relevant as ever, and influences can be found in pop culture today, from Kanye West to Ready Player One. In Neo Tokyo, there's unrest and corruption, protests in the street, and a government that people don't trust. There's fascists and zealots and disparate factions. It's things like this that ring true in Neo Tokyo and in the world today still. I highly recommend starting with the manga and then watching the movie. The movie takes only a portion of the story told in the manga, but it's 2019. There's no better time to jump in than now. And the manga takes place in 2038, so we don't want to wait that long to watch it again. Alright, that's the story of Akira from page to screen. Now it's your turn. I mentioned Denis Villeneuve as a good directorial candidate. Who would you cast? Who would you like to see put on a live action movie? Sound off in the comments section below with your picks. Also, if you enjoyed this video or similar content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and if you haven't already, share this with your friends. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.